Every student has a musical voice waiting to be heard. Today's episode explores how music tech can empower students to create, collaborate, and share their musical ideas with the world. Welcome to Pass the Baton, empowering students in music education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We are so glad to be with you today. So, Kathryn, I had the opportunity to meet today's guest, Gillian, a couple of years ago when we were both presenting at the same conference, and it's just been really neat to see her work. So I'm so excited that she was willing to come talk to us today about music technology. What did you think about the conversation?
Yeah, well, I love music technology, and I know you do. So
Yeah.
I had a good time geeking out on technology. But yeah, no, it was really great to listen to all of her ideas and just her passion for why music education is important, or music technology is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree that the passion was wonderful. And I thought it was also really encouraging to hear that she talked about both music and technology as being important. I think some people think that when we include the technology piece that the music fades away, but that's not the case at all. Right? The technology is supporting the music, and that's what's so valuable in what we can do, and how we can use it in our music classes.
Yeah. And also just the way that we can connect with so many more kids, especially maybe in the older grades, where, they can connect with music if it's not going to be performance, if it's going to be, but for so many other careers, and just a way to connect and express for themselves, which is just so important.
Absolutely. All right. Well, before we get to the interview, do you feel like you're drowning in lesson plans and wish that you had a musical support system in your corner? Well, grab your favorite mug because we have just the thing for you, and that's the Pass the Baton Coffee Club.
For less than the cost of that fancy latte, you'll unlock a treasure trove of free resources. Get invited to our monthly planning parties, thank virtual coffee break with amazing lesson ideas, and score sweet discounts on music education goodies in our store.
Or if you just want to lend a hand to the Pass the Baton mission of empowering music teachers and music students, you can become a supporter, only $2 a month.
Think of it as a way to fuel your passion, elevate your teaching, and connect with a vibrant community of music educators.
So be sure to check out the link. It's in the show notes. You can learn more, and you can join the coffee club today. You deserve it. All right. Welcome back, everyone. We are so glad that you're here to be here with you. And we're so excited about our guest today, Gillian Desmarais Keller. Welcome, Gillian.
Oh, thank you so much again for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So I think, Gillian, what is it? We met maybe at TMEA a couple of years ago through a mutual friend. And I've just enjoyed following your work over the years. You had a recent, what do we call it? Time Teacher of the Year, right?
Yes.
And you've just, been doing some great things. So we're excited to talk to you today about technology and what that can look like in our various music contexts.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was such an honor to be awarded that Time Teacher of the Year. Mike Covens is an incredible music teacher, was an incredible music teacher, and, really inspired so much of this movement in modernizing music education. And to be recognized amongst some of my colleagues whom I've looked up to my entire life was really, truly special. So it's an honor to carry that torch and continue this great work. But I'm so excited to share some of those thoughts and philosophies and tips that I have on using technology in your classroom today. So thanks again.
Awesome. Well, before we get too far down that road, can you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit more about your current background and role in music education.
Absolutely. So currently I teach K through 12 music technology and engineering in Maplewood Public Schools. And this has been a continuous progression. I started teaching K through 5 my first few years of teaching, and I was in a inner city school in Boston. And eventually I transitioned to a middle school, public school in Hanover, Massachusetts. And now currently living in Minnesota, I've established this brand new program. So it's been quite a progression of incorporating technology throughout the years. So now teaching K through 12, my students are invested in the process of not only learning the standard accepted principles within music education, which is literacy, learning how to sing, learning how to perform on an instrument. But now they're also taking those skills and reinforcing them with recording and performing and writing their own lyrics and producing a music video and, different modernized versions of music creation. So that's currently where I'm at right now. And of course, continue to present as well. I've presented at numerous state conferences and now have kind of broadened the spectrum to international conferences as well. I was just presenting in Belgium last year for an Audio Engineering Society conference, which was so eye-opening, to be surrounded by so many educators who are so passionate about this topic. So that's the road I'm continuing down, and it's been a fabulous journey so far.
Great. Oh, that's awesome. And, just thinking about what you were just saying, you were mentioning how you're using the technology to build upon the other musical skills. And I think that's what I appreciate so much about your work, is that it focuses on music and technology and where the two intersect. It's not one or the other, right? And I think that's what a fear some people have. Well, if we introduce the technology, then where's the music? Oh, that's not the case at all. So maybe can you tell us, where did this interest in technology come from, and why is this something that you've become so passionate about incorporating in music classrooms?
It actually started from, honestly, growing up in a household where improvising musically was just so well accepted. My mom's a jazz drummer, and she's also a DJ. So having that influence of technology and yet also having that inspiration of different styles of music that were a little bit more relaxed and free-flowing and, was just such an inspiring experience that I continued to carry with me throughout the years. And so now I've been exploring different avenues of expression, not only through the styles that we know and love, for example, jazz, but also to finding different ways of kind of taking that creative expression that you experience when you're performing on an instrument, or whether you're singing or even just being poetic and getting into the creative, expressive writing piece of music, and then being able to share that. So, early on, again, I was exposed to that kind of experience with my mom. And then eventually, when I got to later on in high school, I really truly fell in love with electronic styles of music. And there were a few specific artists that really, really kind of encouraged me to follow down that road, that path of being inspired by, what types of instruments were being used and how were they created, and asking these really deep questions. And eventually when I got to college, unfortunately there wasn't that much of a opportunity, mostly because of certain classes that just weren't provided at the time. Music technology wasn't necessarily something that was part of the teacher preparatory program. So I had to self-study and self-teach, and eventually, I had taken a little bit of time away from school because I was so invested in learning, and I felt like I was kind of headed down a path that I wasn't necessarily ready to go on. I was basically being prepared to be a band director or a choir teacher or an orchestra teacher, and I knew that I had this passion, and I knew that it was kind of heading me into a space that I needed to explore on my own a little bit more to kind of understand, and kind of head back into teaching. So that's exactly what I did, and eventually landed my first job, of which I loved teaching elementary music. But teaching technology, that was something that kind of naturally and organically happened when I was going home after school and I was recording using the DAW, or I was writing lyrics, or I was, performing on different sounds in the workstation. And I started to think to myself, well, maybe this is something that I could potentially do in a classroom. And so it started with my oldest students, my 5th grade students, and I introduced them to Soundtrap. And eventually that became into this whole unit in which students were learning how to record. And I would be take the time to create these projects for them and then share that with them. And they would go ahead and they would kind of like create their own remixes with those stems that I had developed. And so that kind of became its own project. So throughout the incorporation of these small lessons, it eventually became a huge piece of my class. So that's when general music sort of became that like music technology infused music class where, of course, they're learning different aspects in theory and literacy, like those topics I mentioned before, but then they're also like in tandem learning these technology skills and learning these, really advanced sort of intertwined interdisciplinary skills that they could then transfer to all the rest of their classes that they were taking. So it really has been that like step-by-step progression, not a sprint, it's been a marathon to this point, but it's really been eye-opening, not only as a musician who just truly loves music technology and loves electronic music and loves to see where popular music is going, but also through the eyes of my students, being able to see what's possible at such an early age.
Yeah. I know I have elementary music kids and like, I love using, a DAW because I feel like they get so much satisfaction out of their product and they didn't have to know all of the theory, which down the road I want them to, and, they'll go on to somebody else in junior high and high school and really understand all those things. But for them to have like a really musically rich experience that you really can't get without some help from technology is, it's just really good experiences for them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's really neat. And I know, you were mentioning the general music piece, which is awesome, especially thinking that like, oh, right, we can do this with elementary school kids.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the person who's saying, well, I am a band director, I am a choir director. Where in the world does technology fit into my world? What would you say to those people?
There is so much that you can do within the technology field, and how it's incorporated in the classroom is up to you, truly. For me, when I was starting out, my vision of technology was a little bit different, but my focus was, how can I use technology to organize? How can I use technology to engage my students in a unique way that's beyond just the lecture piece, right? So that first step was really getting acquainted with programs like Google Slides or any of like the Keynote programs, right? Because for me, I felt like so much of what I wanted to share needed a visual because some of it was a little bit deeper or a little bit harder to understand just verbally. And so taking that first step, I really became excited about the process of kind of creating my own lessons. And so from there, I then kind of took the opportunity to just start creating something that was within that passion of music technology. So now if we get into the more creative versions of using that, right, the workstation, the DAW, that's what most popular artists are using now to record themselves, to be able to have opportunities to release their music and share it with their community. So then that piece eventually was kind of intertwined with the curriculum writing. So in tandem with writing something that was brand new, that was kind of like my own work, not really knowing if it was going to work out right away with my students, but just kind of giving myself the chance to try it. I think that's what gave me permission to then start using the workstation. So then, I was starting with using Ableton, which is a little bit more of an advanced professional DAW. But eventually I took a step back and decided, well, what's more important? Me being able to create something that's, professional that could be exported and shared? Or is it more important that I can like intertwine that with what my students are going to be using? So that's where Soundtrap kind of was a little bit better for me to invest more time into. So then that kind of led down the path of, exploring, okay, what kind of lessons can I create using this workstation? And there were a lot of lesson plans that were online and still are, and they're continuing to develop. But I think a lot of that excitement came down to, okay, what is it that I know that I love about using this type of tool? And how can I express this kind of excitement towards my students? Because your students, obviously, they love technology, and they may already be excited about what it is that you've kind of explored, but you just kind of have to give them that permission to try it. And so just even getting my students to record their own voice for the first time, that for me was so eye-opening. I think everyone can relate to that, right? Whether it's your own voice or your own instrument, and being able to hear back and be like, wow, that's what I sound like? Really? It really truly is one of those experiences that's unlike anything else, And so I wanted to first try that with my students. So that became like the first step. And so that is actually one of the first lessons that I would encourage any ensemble director to pursue with their students if they haven't already. Like the process of learning how to record yourself and give yourself that positive feedback to then make those steps that you need to take to improve your instrument. And there's a lot of directors that I know that have the practice logs and things like that. But then you could even take that a step further and think about concepts like, how do I get the right type of sound? Am I recording in the right type of space? Am I using the right type of microphone? Or am I like using the proximity effect properly? Even just me speaking into this microphone, I'm even thinking to myself, am I close enough? Like being able to think about those like higher order concepts beyond just playing your instrument, but also just that step between you and the technology and how the technology is going to then capture that beautiful creative moment. And you want that to be the best it could possibly be. So definitely like a great first step. And then from that, you can really grow and start exploring if you want to go down the creative path of these are effects that you can use on your instrument. I'm not sure how comfortable some teachers are in introducing that early on, but for me, those were huge when I was first learning how to use a workstation. Like, oh my gosh, I can take my sound and I can make it sound like it's in a chamber hall. And then when you hear your flute play in a space that sounds like a church, all of a sudden you're like, wow, I sound really good, and some students don't get that experience of like sounding like that because they're performing in deadened practice rooms, or they're performing with everyone else surrounding them, or they're performing in their bedroom, which again is like a very dead space acoustically. And they probably have, their brother knocking on the wall saying, will you turn it down? So, just kind of giving them that quiet space to really hear themselves and get excited about that, get excited about that experience. It was everything to me when I first started learning that. So that's what I would impart. And then there's also, the obvious progression of exploring those next steps in recording and learning best practices and writing lyrics and things like that. But just the first step of recording can make a huge difference.
Yeah. I know with my kids, we have access to GarageBand. So with I have K5, but like with, third grade up or so, with K and 1, we kind of do it together. But once I give them, they have their own iPad, and the first day is like a scavenger hunt. What can you find? And part of me is like, part of it's just to get, touch all the buttons and do the things and get that out of your system. But also like, there's so much, it's great for them to have that, like a new set of tools they now can use, right? They've got all the instruments in the room to create with, but they also have now these filters and all of these kinds of loops and all of these kinds of different things that are at their fingertips. And you'll be amazed at, like, we'll pull out a book about aliens and we need to be able to, like, we're going to present this to a buddy class and we need to be able to sound like aliens are coming down, or whatever. Somebody will say, wait, there's a filter we can use on the DAW and we could pre-record that. And and it's like, it's just interesting how, there's just all these little tools you can have and you just never know how you might use them. But the tech tool just gives you a whole separate set of tools to use to create with, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I love that, taking kind of a concept that is pretty exciting for students, I think, being able to make something as sci-fi as those unique sounds and then being able to manipulate them and create something that's their own. That's really, really exciting too. And I really try to listen to my students as to what they're interested in. I mean, the movies that they watch, the music that they listen to, what excites them outside of school. And then I can kind of take that and say, okay, well, I'm going to teach you this higher order concept, but we're going to do it in a way that's fun, that doesn't feel like learning. And that's where I feel like music technology really excels, is because it takes something that could be really complicated or challenging or complex, and it breaks it down in a way where students are collaborating with each other. They're creating a project and they're learning that concept through the process of being creative with that. And it really just makes it fun. And when learning is fun, you don't feel like you're learning. And ultimately, that's the best experience that we could give our students, where they can learn all of these skills, whether it's technology, whether it's, actual social emotional skill. As long as we're providing that kind of tool that makes that accessible for them, then we've done our job. We've provided that space where they can grow and they can learn and they can have fun and not feel the stress or the pressure amongst their classmates, even amongst the teacher, and just really grow to love music. Because essentially, we want them to be lifelong lovers of music. And eventually, we're also too going to discuss the 80% and, how that's being impacted right now. And I think what's going to help with engaging all of our students is providing them an experience in which they can grow and learn with music. They can learn to explore and love the process of learning music and continue that the rest of their life. And that, for me, I feel like is something that I was able to experience in my ensemble classes and in my general music classes and in my music technology classes. It's just all in the way in which that teacher can help students to, get to that place, whatever that looks like. So that's my spin on that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that 80%, right? And in the case people aren't familiar with that kind of terminology, when we say the other 80%, referring to, the other 80% of the students who often aren't in a music class in secondary school. And I think that's like an actual statistic that we say approximately 20% of students are enrolled in music, but the other 80% are not. Obviously, those kids, they don't hate music, right? How can we use technology to help meet their needs?
Yeah. So 7th and 8th grade, around that time frame is when we see the biggest drop off. So you have students K through 5 who are all participating in music. When you get to middle school, students have more of an opportunity to pick whatever musically they want to do, whether it's choir, band, or orchestra. And then again, so 7th and 8th grade, students start to decide whether this is something that they want to continue doing. And oftentimes, students will pursue other interests, which is fine. We want to see them fall into the passions that continue to make them the people that they are. But then again, when they start high school and they don't have that continued music education, then they start to lose an appreciation for that art. So then you have these people who are going on to become lawyers and doctors and professionals or politicians, and they don't necessarily have that grounding of how music continues to support people beyond just the experience that people have when they listen to music or they go to concerts or they study music. It's the aspects that maybe people don't think about, like how music can help anxiety or help trauma and depression, how music can bring people together and be a collaborative experience. There's just so many aspects within music that are beyond just performing on an instrument and finding success within that. And I feel like for me as a teacher, it's my job to try to engage students in whatever means necessary musically, that they can find that path and continue that beyond high school, that they can continue to use music as a source of reprieve, or they can use music as a way of understanding our history and our world better. There's so many aspects, and obviously technology, having music be a piece of that creative aspect. Some students, they may not go into music technology, but they may go into video, and music is an obvious piece of video, right? So having that background, having that appreciation, it all works together. So I think if we want to continue to build our programs, we need to understand that incorporating technology is not going to take our students away from our band, choir, and orchestra class. It's only going to improve our programs. And I know that's a big fear amongst a lot of teachers. They think, oh, well, this technology class that we're now going to offer, it may be cooler, or it might seem cooler than, practicing your etudes on an instrument. And what if we lose all our band kids? That's not going to happen. And let me tell you why. It's because it's a different avenue of participating in music. When I was in school, I wanted to be in band and choir and music technology and the musical after school and theater, because they're totally different avenues of performing and experiencing music. And so you're going to have students who are going to want to play an instrument and be part of your music technology class. Or you may have a student who is in music technology and realizes, wait, it would be really nice to learn an instrument because this is kind of hard without. And they might join your band class because they want to have that skill. So it all kind of works together. And so it's going to be the next big step for us as music teachers as we move forward into the future. 10 years from now, I could see every teacher facilitating some sort of music technology class, being able to use a DAW in some capacity, right? And so now it's just how do we prepare for that future, whether it's ourselves and being able to utilize that, or it's our students and being able to embrace that and use that in their own paths.
I think it's so important what you said. It's not replacing band, chorus, orchestra, but it's giving more students the opportunity. It's building the program. And that's, I think, where we need to focus our energy is how can we give more students musical opportunities in school? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Something that we wrote in our book, Pass the Baton, was something to try tomorrow. So, and people really receive that really well. It's nice just to give you a small step to just kind of dabble in a topic. So what would you suggest to people if they wanted to just, dive into a little bit of technology, but they don't really know where to start?
It's a great question. So I was mentioning this before. It's really important to let your own passions for this style of music drive your learning, because that's the way that your students are going to want to essentially learn too. So my suggestion would be, first, if you want to go this route, listen to a bunch of music that incorporates different instrument styles. So electronic music, for example, has a lot of different synthesized sounds and drum machine sounds. Allow yourself to really explore and decide what it is that you really like about those styles of music. And then the next step would be to just dive right in and start exploring using a workstation. So I mentioned a few in the past, but there are a bunch of others. So Soundtrap and Ableton happen to be some of my favorites, but you could explore BandLab, you could explore Logic Pro, or Reaper's a free DAW, Cubase, And there's Logic. There's a bunch of others that you could explore online too. FL Studios is another one. Most of them offer free trials. So just try the free trial. Download it, watch a couple YouTube videos, get your feet wet with it, and just see where it takes you. That's where I would start. If we want to also engage teachers, and even for myself, when I was first trying to really figure out how I wanted to utilize this in my classroom, if we want to engage teachers in the process of trying to do this fall, for example, I know this episode is going to be coming out in the fall, but if we want to get them to start it like right away, say you want to start using technology next week, right? I think my first step would be to start looking at free web applications. That's a really great start because those applications are pretty simplified. They usually express some sort of objective that's easy for students to understand, and it's also easy to understand as a teacher. And they're just great to begin with, kind of begin down that process of learning more of the professional skills. So, some examples. Everyone knows Music Ed Lab's version of Chrome Music Lab, where students are learning sound waves. They're learning the process of creating a song using a simple structure. Great place to start. I'm sure most of you who are listening probably have used that because it was so widely used during the pandemic. So some others, Groove Pizza, which is also developed through NYU. That's great for being able to visualize drum sounds, but just through that kind of cyclical pattern. So that's useful. Some others that I've explored as well. Let's see. I've used, I actually have a whole list that I could post. In fact, because there's so many, I often keep track just using that list. But there's just such a wide variety online. Sampulator is another one that I'm thinking of, where you're basically using the keyboard keys to cue sounds. And that's really interesting and unique for students. But again, you're only going to probably achieve one objective with that web app. The other ones that I've explored, for example, BandLab and Soundtrap, those being also web applications, but those are pretty fledged out DAWs. You know, they can really do quite a bit. And I've actually done quite a bit just professionally on those workstations because, you know, they're simplified in a way where you have basically all the necessary effects that you need to use or all the sounds that you would probably want within your music. And then you just go ahead and start creating from there. Now, I will say from personal experience, the loop library that's in Soundtrap is very, very good. And they continue to update that. I'm not sure about BandLab. I know they do have loops, and loop-based creating of music is really, really great just to have you start or have your students start with making something that's linear. So I would definitely consider that too if you're kind of beyond the one objective web apps. Maybe start exploring how BandLab or Soundtrap can kind of engage your students in just dragging and dropping loops and then facilitating those conversations about, well, this is how you create a chorus or a verse. You can start to get into, you know, some of the song structure elements. And then eventually you're going to have some students be like, can I play a solo over this? Or can I rap over this? And so that kind of opens that door. But loop-based music for sure. And then eventually you're going to want to have your students creating their own music. So you'll have to eventually transition, especially if you're working with high school students. You're going to want to start using a program like Ableton or Logic or Cubase versus using the BandLab and Soundtrap because there are limitations. I had my high school students even working in Soundtrap for a while, and at a certain point they were like, Ms. D, I think this is really cool, but I really want to be able to learn something that I can then go ahead into the studio and use with professional recording, or just with musicians that are more invested in this type of music making. And walking in with Soundtrap would be fine, but odds are they're not going to be using that in professional studios. They're going to be using the top tier DAWs like Pro Tools or like Ableton. So giving students that early on ability to explore those types of DAWs is really crucial too. So that's like the third big step, is then transitioning into a professional workstation, whether you're doing it or whether your students are doing it. And then that will lend to the full-fledged curriculum that you provide for your students. So maybe your elementary students are starting on web applications. Your middle school students are then doing that and then transitioning to Soundtrap or Ableton or BandLab, and they're using loops and creating loop-based music. And then your high school students are then learning a professional DAW. And if you can imagine your high school student who goes through your program and knows how to play an instrument and knows how to record and write lyrics, by the time they get to high school, think about how good they're going to be. You know, think about how skilled they'll be. I mean, I've met so many musicians who are like, man, I wish I had that type of program in my school, because I would have been able to start releasing music earlier. I would have been able to reach a community of people that understood what type of music I was trying to make sooner, instead of waiting till my 30s to finally find that. These students, when they graduate, they're going to be reaching their 20s and they're going to have all the skills they need to be a professional musician in the industry now. So that being the end goal, I know that was a full-fledged answer to your question, but just to give that perspective, I mean, that's essentially, I mean, hopefully what we would want for our students. I certainly know it's what I want for my students. And just consider that as you're deciding what it is that you want to step into. But web apps to web app DAWs, and then eventually to the professional DAW.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to remember that, through all of this, the students are gaining skills to be lifelong musicians. And then they're also getting skills that could be translated into career skills. And that's huge. We're not saying they all have to be professionals, right? That's not the goal, is that every single student who goes through our program will be a professional musician in whatever capacity. But they have the tools they could if they want to, or they could just enjoy it personally because it makes them happy.
Right. It's so, so true. Yeah. And I feel like that is sort of underestimated. The fact that learning how to do all of this isn't just to become popular or just to become famous, right? We're doing it because it's self-expression. It's something that it's even hard to find the words to describe what it feels like when you create something using your own voice or your own instrument that's uniquely yours. I guess it's sort of like making a painting or, designing a sculpture. It's like that end result is so satisfying, and it's more than just creating something. It's like finding what uniquely makes you and what you're passionate about. And beyond how big your community is at the end of it all, there's famous musicians that continue to do this. And even though they have huge followings, they say, I'm actually not really doing it for the big community that I have. I'm actually doing it for myself, because it's a way of me to just process what's going on in my life, or it's a way that I feel connected to myself deeper than anything else that I've experienced. So that's another really strong point which you bring up there. So thank you for saying that, Theresa.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. Well, this is great. I appreciate that you've been able to give some, really powerful why behind why technology is so valuable for our students, and then also just what people can do and how they can think about incorporating it to help these young people become lifelong musicians, lifelong lovers of music, appreciators, all of those things. So
have a confident musical voice, right?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yep. So if people wanted to connect with you, learn a little bit more about what you're up to, how could they do that?
I would say the best way is check out my website. I have a website called Soundtech Ed, and on that website, you can just find basically any information that I've posted regarding articles, kind of describing the type of curriculum that I use in my classroom, lesson plans that you can use for free that are on there. I also have a bunch of different resources that I've posted for teachers who attend the state conferences that I present at. So you'll see a bunch of resources from TMEA, from ILMEA, and just any presentations that I've put together. As well as that, future presentations I will post on that website. So if you happen to be in the state or going to the conference, I'll see you there. It would be fantastic to connect. You can also just reach me personally. I have a contact form there. Ask me questions. If you want to talk about philosophy, I will discuss it all day long. As you can tell, I'm very, very passionate about this. And it's so important to have those conversations. So please feel free to reach out to me. And I do have my own music that I've posted on there as well. I wish I had time to post more, but it's been really, really busy recently. Of course, not a great excuse, but I've really tried to put, music technology education at the forefront of what I do right now. But if you're interested in exploring different types of music that can be made in the DAW from scratch, check out some of my own music that I've made using my voice. And I'm a flute player, so I got plenty of that on there. And you can kind of see what's possible, and feel free to use it for your students if you need an example as well. So all of that you'll find there. And yeah, find me on Facebook or find me on LinkedIn. Love to connect.
Awesome. And you and I are going to be at the same conference in December, aren't we?
Yes, we are going to be at the renowned Midwest Clinic. And now, have you been before? I have not.
I've been several times, but this is my first time presenting. So, you're in for a treat if you've never been at all.
Yes. I am so excited. I've heard such incredible things about this conference. In addition to that, too, I'm so excited to finally share these resources fully with the teachers that are attending. So if you're planning on going to the Midwest Clinic, our clinics are going to be top notch, and hopefully they'll give you all the resources that you need to start using this technology right away. Again, lesson plans and presentations and any just curricular details that you need. Hopefully, they will provide. So we definitely highly encourage you to come and speak with us, or at least just come and listen and absorb yourself in this type of work, because it's so important, and we'd love to have you.
Yes. Everything that she said. Exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we sold them. I think they're in. So thank you again, Gillian. We really appreciate your time and just everything that you've been able to share with us today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for having me. Anytime.
Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate music educators.